Welcome to the second episode of this Ring Races playthrough. I promise I didn't mean for there to be a 4-month gap between episodes, but other things came up and continuing this series got pushed further and further back. A little housekeeping before we begin though. I hadn't played Ring Races since the last episode before I began working on this one, so I'm back to being as rusty as before. I practiced a little on some match races so that I could practice without setting up times on trial attack mode or continuing the Grand Prix. Generally try and avoid anything that would affect the continuity of the series, you know. But I did turn on a mod that changed the controller UI to match a DualShock controller. I forgot about the challenge for using an add-on, which meant I unlocked a new character, Carol. I have no idea who this is. Also, for those wondering, no, the DualShock UI doesn't make mapping buttons any easier when the game is outright lying about what buttons you're pressing. Apparently my bumpers are now triggers, and all the face buttons outside of the X are all mixed up. But anyway, with that out of the way, we can move on to the second leg of the Grand Prix, the Sneaker Cup. I thought about upping the ante for this episode and increasing the difficulty from relaxed to intense. I then cast my mind back to my performance last time, saw I only had one life, and made the sensible decision. I need time to build up to that difficulty spike. And just in case you needed an example of why I need that time, the first thing I did when starting Emerald Coast, the first course of the Sneaker Cup, was drive into a swimming pool of my own volition and die. An awkward start to the race, although I quickly sped past everyone else to sit comfortably in first. I dropped into the water during this section, which is luckily less lethal than the hotel swimming pool, I don't know how, then drove headfirst into this lighthouse. Although it may seem like a case of complete ineptitude, it was in fact a cunning strategy to throw off the jaws targeting me. But now that I had spent the first lap building up a buffer zone, I used the second lap to reacquaint myself with some of Ring Races' unique mechanics. Spending rings to get an on-demand speed boost, having to manually select an item from the item box roulette, the fast fall, which gave me the realization that to get over this section I probably needed to use a spin dash, and so on and so forth. Then, putting all of this together, I was competent enough to keep that first place through to the third lap, take the spin dash shortcut, avoid the lighthouse, and get myself a nice A rank. The only problem was this lag spike I got as I crossed the finish line, paired with a message that my control had been disconnected and replaced with the same controller. Now, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm just going to slide this counter on screen and ask that you don't pay it any mind. I'm sure it was just a one-off thing, but just in case, you know? But anyway, on to the next course. I started Storm Rig with a unique plan. Ignore the countdown and the other contestants charging up their spin dashes, and instead reverse down this slope. In my defense, I saw the sneaker panels on them as you use at the end of the lap, and assumed I could reverse quickly enough to reach them and get a speed boost off of the line. I could not, and I once again started at the back of the pack. Luckily, with only one race under their belt, the AI are still at the completely useless stage of their development, and any I didn't immediately speed past blew themselves up by the second straight, so I was once again able to get into an early lead. Storm Rig isn't a particularly complex course, essentially being the same straight and long corkscrew segment, copy and pasted 4 times over. The corkscrews are the perfect size and length to allow you to max out the drift boost, and you can then use that boost upon its release to break through these tripwires to reach various useful things. You'd assume then that, safely out of the rat race in first place, I had the perfect opportunity to get those perfect drift boosts and further enhance my lead. If you thought that, You haven't been paying attention to how I played this game. No, I was worried I'd lose the speed boost by the time I reached the tripwires, so I kept avoiding them and played, as a result, a very boring race. Aside from a few moments where I had to keep Sonic, who had been designated as my rival, at bay, I drove into another A rank with ease. How's the counter looking? Ah, this might be more of a problem than I thought. Tinkerer's Arena is the first prison stage of the Sneaker Cup, and I've realised since the last episode that I don't actually get what these are for. I assumed they were something to do with the special stages I've heard about, but that's apparently a completely different thing involving intense difficulty and continues and a bunch of other factors. Are these here just to give you an opportunity to get yourself a few bonus continues? Ah well, at least they're enjoyable. It's satisfying driving around taking out these prisons, even if it took me a while to remember how the mode worked. Lamest prison takedown is this one. It took me a while to remember how to lob the Gatsa bombs, then a while longer to actually hit the damn thing. Coolest takedown is this one. I don't think I actually hit it, but I'll take it. And finally, destroying one of the prisons dropped the CD. A nice extra and a great song once I got to listen to it, but I don't know whether I did something special or if that prison always drops it. Another A rank, another continue, and we move on. Lucid Pass was a stronger start than I had managed in previous races. Namely, I managed to start a race higher than dead last. It was also mildly more exciting of a start, as I immediately got an Orbinaut and knocked out a few of the other racers. My steering was a bit looser and I tended to skirt the off-road a fair bit during this race, as I had gotten more comfortable with spending rings to effectively force my ring racer to cut out corners, but it was overall a fairly relaxed race. Until the last half of the third lap. At that moment, Amy, who had been tailing me for most of the race while everyone else languished much further back, managed to land a hit with a jaws on the slope, which left me much too slow to catch up. Only had a few corners to do so, and I probably wouldn't have, if I didn't get a pair of sneakers at the last possible moment. I blasted right past Amy, and kept my well-deserved first place for yet another A rank. Pure skill. What's the counter looking like? Oof, definitely going to need to look into that for next time. Autumn Ring was the point in this run. Allow me to explain. So far, every time I've played a cup in ring races, there has been one moment where you can tell the AI has switched on. They've locked in. Every time I get an A rank on a course during a cup, the level that the AI runs at increases, but it's not really that noticeable or dramatic a jump in difficulty for the first 3 to 4 races. Then, during the penultimate race, if you kept getting A ranks, it's like they jump 6 levels at once and you really do begin to fight them for the top spots. I got a decent start with a full ring stock, having used a rings item box that was laying in the corner of the starting area, and I settled into a third behind Sonic and Amy. That didn't last long though, as between an encounter with a huge mighty and some mishandled garden tops on my end, I dropped far into the middle of the pack. It took until the second lap for me to make some sustained improvements, when I finally got myself a shrink. Thanks for the comments on the last video that confirmed that the Pobies weren't track features, I just couldn't find them in the manual. Combining the grow effect with invincibility and some sneakers allowed me to make up a massive amount of distance, and I stormed from 6th all of the way into a first. I nearly got screwed over by another controller disconnect, which, as it turns out, doesn't just cause a massive lag spike, it also kills your acceleration. That let Sonic and Amy catch back up, and I only got past them due to luck. Amy drove straight into a drop target, which gave me the place needed to hit Sonic with a Jaws. There wasn't a huge amount of track left for the other racers to catch up to me after that, especially after I heard an explosion and saw their icon slow down, so I cruised past the finish line with another first. Only a B rank this time though, as I had burnt all my rings and failed to secure pole positions on previous laps. Might be a blessing in disguise though, as it'll keep the AI from improving, and they were plenty nasty already in this race. Tri-Circle Marina was a nice, relaxing reprieve before we get to the final race. After a slow start, I had a nice, simple, satisfying time, taking out the prisons to earn myself an A rank, and another continue. Lamest takedown was this one, as I just sat around a while before the prison got into a position I could hit. And the coolest was this one. The drift into the ending was a nice final flourish. Note that we are on our 9th disconnect though, and quite frankly my PC setup is in such a state that I could not tell you whether it's the PC, game, controller, or connecting wire that's causing the problem. Withering Satau is an interesting level, because, I guess we're going now, sorry. Wasn't expecting a race before the race. I got an early pair of sneakers, which I used to take a shortcut and bypass the first turn, but it didn't do much to help me. Amy had become my new rival, and she had an imposing lead. Based on the noise and just barely noticeable flash of colour during this corkscrew, I think I missed being part of a huge explosion by millimeters, which let me focus on cutting down on Amy's lead. Unfortunately, that's easier said than done. I had enough A ranks to level up the AI to speed hacks territory, and any advantage I got was quickly shut down. Hit Amy with a pair of Jaws. She drove past a few seconds later, none the worse for wear. Get another sneaker to cut out the first big turn? Doesn't matter as Amy's just faster. Cut out another corner? Don't think you can compete with this. In the third lap my luck went from bad to worse. No sneaker to bypass the first turn, get knocked back by this tripwire, and I'm just going to let this section play because I have no way to describe it. I did not know items could do that. It caused me to hit rock bottom. A final invincibility did little to help when Amy's already past the finish line, especially when I knocked Knuckles out of the way right at the end, only for him to get launched past the finish line, so I still finished in 7th. Definitely need a restart after that. My starts haven't been great throughout the Sneaker Cup, but this final race has to take the cake. I didn't realise the game automatically started the next race when you restart, so I left my game running when I ran off to answer my door, and then I got 2 controller disconnections, bringing the counter up to way too many. I only caught up because the restart had made the AI dumber and, more importantly, slower. I scrapped with Amy through the first and second laps, but it took until the third for a definitive blow to land. A beautiful snipe on my behalf, leading to her falling behind while I got to pick someone's lost sneakers. With a cushy lead, I dared to use them to try and get a paint canister, after I realised this weird rainbow effect I had seen throughout the courses was highlighting them. I had assumed it was a visual glitch of some kind. Unfortunately, I missed the ramp, so I settled in to pick it up sometime in the future. In fighting amongst the rest of the races, it kept my lead intact, to the point that I felt confident enough to not bother spending any more rings, passing the finish line with a full ring stock for a final A rank. And that was that. If you ignore the single B rank and continue use, a pretty damn good run of A ranks. As the top tier racers drove up to the podium, I realised it was pretty much the Sonic CD trio. Me as Metal Sonic, and then an AI controlled Amy and Sonic. Of course, as Sonic was the loathsome copy, he could only eke out a third, with Amy taking second after a second half resurgence. Overall rank? A, of course, and with the exception of a pretty dismal showing for the rings, the rest of the stats seem pretty good as well. But what of the most important part of the racing experience? The rewards. Well, there's of course the next cup, specifically the Spring Cup, as well as the CD from earlier, which has the Japanese and European special stage theme from Sonic CD. Not sure where you'd listen to it outside of this extras menu, but as I mentioned earlier, it's a good song. But ignore all of that. For having played ring races for a specified amount of time, I got my first companion. A lowly motorbug, sure, but it's a start. The biggest challenge was then actually equipping it, as that was a nightmare. But now we look like real ring racers. I hope you enjoyed the video and are ready for the next one. Hopefully much sooner than in 4 months. But for now, ciao.